6 years ago, in 2018, UAE introduced its second federal indirect tax. Yes, I'm talking about VAT, value added tax. And since then, it has evolved enormously. In order to discuss that, today I have with me our indirect tax partner, Mahir. I have our VAT trainer, Dalia, and I have indirect tax director, Anisa. And I am Ali Behdi Abbas, senior manager with PwC's Academy. My first question is, we have all had our different experiences when it comes to VAT, whether we look at it from a training point of view or from leading the business or from client advisory. So I wanted to check from all of us that how was your experience over the last 6 years when it comes to, especially to UAE VAT? So I'll start with you, Mahir, and want to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, sure, Ali. Thank you. Look, as you mentioned, 6 years ago, VAT has been implemented. I remember during that period, lots of challenges happened, not only about understanding how VAT works, but also how businesses can prepare themselves to be compliant with the VAT legislation. And if I want to take this from 2019 till now, things moved in a more, I would say, organized, strategic manner. To a certain extent now, it's not about managing compliance, it's not about understanding the legislation, it's about coping with the evolution of VAT and how things are being actually moving forward. I'm sure everyone heard about the invoicing, I'm sure everyone heard about what's happening on the global perspective. VIDA, for example, which is the platform regulation for indirect taxes, and lots of things happening in the background. I think we're at a stage now where things are more stable, but things are moving more to be more looking into automation, digitalization. So it's an era where we're moving from doing things on Excel, on paper, to be more focusing on technology, on AI, because this is the future, right? I think all of us, we came from an era where we saw the evolution of no mobile phones to mobile phones.
Yeah.
I can link this now to an era where everyone would be more focusing on technology, automation, and that's the evolution, or that's the future of a going forward.
I agree with that. I think you've raised a very interesting point of how technology is merging with taxation, and that is super helpful from a compliance perspective. It probably helps the tax authorities as well when it comes to understanding and ensuring compliance is actively done. But on the same note, as you mentioned earlier, there has been this evolution. So what was the experience seeing all these updates happen? I know from my own experience that especially in the last year and a half, a lot of updates, particularly on VAT, has come. Consequently, with corporate tax. So you have corporate tax on one side and new updates related to VAT coming as well. So how has that experience been from an advisory and from a training perspective as well?
I think the role of tax authority in raising awareness, issuing guidance, clarification was key in that journey, but also the role of consultants and trainers like PwC Academy was also important to continue or establish that journey and continue the evolution of clarifying how taxes would impact businesses, how to deal with taxes. It's not about only businesses dealing with tax, right? Sometimes you need to have not sometimes, all times you need to have that awareness embedded within the organization at CEO, at CFO, at tax manager, at IT, at legal, because VAT or taxes are not only a finance or tax element. It's more about the organization of it. I think that evolution is happening and still going to the right direction. One thing to highlight, and you mentioned corporate tax, right? Corporate tax is another federal tax that has been implemented in the UAE. With corporate tax, there is also transfer pricing. There's also economic substance requirements. All this has interlinked with VAT. I can share something with you within the last seminar we had. My session on VAT was the last one. Okay. I was hearing all your colleagues discussing VAT, corporate tax, transfer pricing, accounting requirements, so on. My intro was simple. I was like, was great sessions. Thanks to my colleagues. All what have been mentioned have VAT implications.
True.
So that's how we need to think about taxes. We cannot separate taxes.
True.
Transfer pricing will have VAT implication.
Yeah.
Will have customs implication. Corporate tax need to reconcile with your VAT record. So all these are interlinked. And to a certain extent, you will have same people dealing with taxes within the organization. So awareness and learning and development at their level is key. It's important. They cannot stop looking into what's happening because legislation will evolve, practical experience will evolve. It's been 6 years now. We have lots of precedent cases and from Supreme Court, for example,
Right.
that you can refer to and see what's happening in the background. So it's all linked together, and the evolution is not to stop looking into what's happening. If you know something, you know it, but we need to know also what's going on.
That's the spirit. Yeah.
You think about it, when Maha and I were working together in 2017, we were working off that implementation.
Okay.
We were getting questions like, what is tax and what is VAT? How is this going to impact my business? But as you think about it over the years, that those discussions are changing and they're evolving. So how are we adding tax to the agenda on the decision-making that CFOs are making?
True.
How are we adding tax to the agenda on deals that are being done, on mergers and acquisitions, or restructuring? And now with the introduction of corporate tax and transfer pricing, there's so many different tax angles that you need to think about.
Yeah.
It's not okay to now not have a tax team or not have a tax person in your organization. It's a necessity because otherwise it's going to lead to a full load of complications.
And just one point, I just wanted to ask from your perspective, because I actually was a consultant back in 2019 up to 2021, and then I became a tax trainer. So how do you feel like the people's kind of mentality is in terms of comparing what people looked at VAT when it first got implemented in comparison to how people are actually looking at CT now that CT is being implemented? Are they taking it as seriously or
A lot more.
a lot more? Yeah.
When you think about corporate tax, the end cost to the business,
Yeah.
True.
they
Yeah.
get that right, or they don't account for it correctly, or they're not compliant.
Yeah.
From a VAT perspective, VAT by nature should never be a cost to the business. That should always be a pass-through.
Yeah, it's that.
VAT is a transaction-based tax. It should be a cost to the final consumer.
True.
So even though it shouldn't be a cost to the business, you still need to ensure that you're compliant. You still need to ensure your processes are in place, your systems are in place, your training's in place, your people are aware. And unless you get all of that right, tax will be a huge burden to businesses unless we get that right.
I think point that we'll talk about the training bit a bit more as well. But one point that you made, Anisa, in relation to tax becoming a part of the board discussions, and this is something I often talk about as well, that it is about time that tax professionals need to have a seat at the table, because companies now need to take their tax a lot more seriously. We have got VAT, excise, transfer pricing, corporate tax now. We are looking towards a Pillar 2 regime. So with all this, it's time that you need to have a tax person at the board level guiding the company in terms of what decisions need to be made. Now, on that note, okay, that's the board level. But when we talk about the general compliance and operations, what has the experience been in terms of the general education or capabilities in taxation in the region? How do you see that has evolved? Now, I know Dali would have some thoughts from a training point of view, but generally in your client discussions as well, going away from explaining what is input and output to actually having more, in-depth discussion, how have you seen the evolution of talent in the region when it comes to tax?
But I can refer to again back to the implementation. And when we were doing the implementation, lots of clients has dedicated someone from finance or from legal to be that VAT person to help us on this implementation project.
Yeah.
That person now has 6 years of experience on VAT.
On VAT, true.
And that person also potentially will be working on corporate tax, on transfer price. So I would say people who were in the Middle East or were in the UAE and they have lived that VAT implementation have now 6 years of experience, and their experience is growing in terms of dealing with complex matter within the organization, dealing with disputes, dealing with communicating with the tax authority. So that has helped, I would say, talent to grow within the Middle East. I also remember when we had the VAT implementation time, we were struggling to find resources.
Indeed, yes.
Recruit.
Yeah.
So we had to go to other mature jurisdictions to get people on secondment or to recruit people. Currently, my LinkedIn profile is bombarded with messages saying I have VAT experience, I have corporate tax experience, which is a good thing. It's a good thing.
It's a good thing, but like just coming back to this is, yes, people have a lot of experience with the implementation of VAT, but there are a lot of transitional rules for corporate tax which are linked to finance, which technically are slightly different to VAT, because corporate tax is very predominantly just linked to your financial statements. And now looking at it, when was the last time a country actually kind of implemented corporate tax? It was a very long time ago. I'm hoping it was before our time. So it's just finding the right talent, is like kind of putting both things, like VAT implementation is great, but also backed up with your accounting knowledge as well, and your experience with like financial statements, and also like standards, given that corporate tax is now based on IFRS. So
I think you've raised a very valid point here. And I think one thing very interesting that I saw myself, I mean, I've been around the region for a while. Back in 2017, I was with Client Advisory. I noticed, especially with the SME sector, that there wasn't much accounting culture per se. But that changed. Now people, and since VAT, people have been taking their accounting overall more seriously, the maintaining of their books, records, recognizing their sales properly. So from a mindset shift, I think a cultural change has happened. But that still, I think that more needs to be done in terms of bringing the accounting capabilities to a level that people can implement not just VAT, but other taxes properly as well.
yeah, I was actually at an event a couple of weeks ago, and they had like a recruiter, and he was telling like what are people actually looking for, and the key things that they are looking for currently for people for corporate tax. They have to have VAT knowledge in the UAE, and then they also have to have accounting knowledge, which previously you didn't actually need both for VAT.
Yeah.
So yeah.
No, I agree. Look, I think VAT, you mentioned it was the second federal tax. Excise tax, to a certain extent, didn't have lots of complication in terms of compliance.
Yeah.
But VAT came and set the norms of having books ready.
Yes, books and records.
I remember at the time we were doing a couple of our sessions, people were asking, do I need now to start doing my accounting? Look, small and medium businesses were not there. With multinationals, we're always
there. Yeah, they had some system.
So VAT put that standards on the right road. Now, yes, agree. It's not about the corporate tax. It's about a full set of and knowledge on accounting, on VAT, on corporate tax, transfer pricing. You cannot isolate these things. What we're currently doing, and Alisa is very important, is with any corporate tax impact assessment we're doing for our clients, we always jump in and say, well, this is the analysis made. We have those VAT implications that we need also to be aware of. And it's not about adding on top of their complexity and another complexity, but it's more about raising that awareness, because they need to be aware that it's all together. It's one.
Especially when you're talking about like restructuring and with corporate tax, that's predominantly what people are doing, like business restructuring now.
Yeah.
So
Ali, both of you are in the trade sector, I would say. How do you see the evolution of participants, attendees, right? Because I would assume at the beginning of that implementation or that journey, it was the basic stuff. How things are evolving, what kind of questions you're receiving per session, because I'm sure it's becoming more and more complex, right?
Indeed. So when it started, I remember the first batch of VAT diploma, it was, we delivered that back in January 2018. And at that time, there were very few. I remember training a batch of about 50 people, and probably in that one or two. Well, yeah, at that time, it was except for one or two people. People did not really understand what was going on. The terms output, the terms input were fascinating terms. I mean, you'd get those, magic moments with the crowd.
Added reverse charge.
Reverse charge was a proper, understanding matter. And, terms like zero rating versus exemption, things like that, you really had to spend time on it. But, 6 years down the line, when it came to corporate tax, and a lot of people that we train are tax agents, when I had the same group once again for corporate tax, they already understood the meaning of terms like exemption, the meaning of terms like what is a zero rate, and that could help them link it further with other taxes. So for your question, I think the evolution has really happened in the talent as well. People now understand tax concepts much better and more widely, which is helping them in corporate tax understanding.
But don't ever underestimate the importance of tax in a business.
Yeah.
So when I speak to CFOs and I say to them, what is keeping you up at night? Often the answer I'm hearing is tax.
Yeah.
Because they now realize the importance of it. They realize the importance of getting it wrong and the implications of it. They realize the importance of potential penalties and non-compliance, the impact that has on reputation.
True.
And we're seeing more and more importance being given to tax within business.
You mentioned VAT shouldn't be a cost for the business, right? Which I agree, but penalties is.
Yeah.
So that's the important thing. We've seen any cases where penalties were severe, I would say, and it created some, I would say, echoes within the organization that it can't be happening this way if something went wrong. So we always say, don't wait until things get to that route.
True.
Your strategy to manage VAT should start at day one. And it started on 1 January 2018 and should continue. It cannot be a one-off exercise. I think that was the message we had at that time where we were doing awareness sessions, that the implementation of VAT is not a one-off project. I think that should be an ongoing monetary project that shouldn't end. But again, going back to the training and the awareness, I'm aware of a couple of activities that we are doing, and it's getting good vibes within the market. But what's next on the agenda from a VAT perspective?
So, as you rightly mentioned, that we are seeing a lot of updates happening in VAT as well. A lot of new decisions have come in relation to VAT. A lot of probably much awaited clarifications have come when it comes to value-added tax. So myself and Dalia, we are doing a VAT conference on the 2nd of March just to discuss these updates, because a lot of people who have taken trainings with us from prior years are now asking us. There's a lot of appetite for updates. There's a lot of appetite for people to learn, because as you both also mentioned, that now it's the time that clients are asking questions. So it's changed from the time that advisors would go and tell companies that, look, you need to do this. It's more come to a point that companies are now reaching out to advisor, telling them, what do we need to do? And for that reason, the appetite for learning the updates is there. And we are planning to keep this momentum going with more conferences, more updates down the line, not just for corporate tax, but also for VAT, on which we feel the updates are really important to ensure compliance. Because at the end of the day, a tax penalty is a tax penalty, whether it's for corporate tax or for VAT or for any other tax.
Would you believe that Maha and I are still working on clients that have not registered for VAT? They should have registered back in 2018.
Wow.
Because they are still not aware that they should have done that.
Yeah, I've actually had students come in and then realize that they should have registered whilst they're in my class.
Whilst they're in the
class. I'm teaching them mandatory registration, and then it clicks. I was like, oh, I should have registered 3 years ago.
I remember a light bulb moment like that. It's just that you mentioned. It was back in 2017 year end or 2018 start. So I was in my VAT diploma, and I just discussed that prices should be inclusive of tax when they're displayed. And there was this one student who asked me, "Do you have a reference for that?" It probably had a light bulb moment, and I was like, "Sure, I showed him the reference, and then he just went out of the classroom, and I saw him on the phone. And then I asked him later in the break what's going on. I was like, "Thank you for telling me that, because none of our prices were inclusive, but now we're changing that right now." So yeah, I think there is a lot of need for this understanding. If it was back then, it still is till date.
Just to add on to the VAT conference that we're doing, like Maher said, every kind of transaction or kind of decision that you're making currently, it has a VAT kind of knock-on effect.
True.
So that is something that we'll also be discussing in more detail in the VAT conference.
No, I think this is important for everyone to understand, that when it comes to tax, it's not just one tax in isolation. You look at it from a wider lens and see what needs to be done. Because ultimately, and it goes in this direction as well, right? You may plan something that may help you on your corporate tax, but then may not help you on your VAT. I was having this discussion with somebody who was mentioning themselves as a large organization, for example. You may be a large organization for VAT, but not for corporate tax for that instance. So VAT is, as you've mentioned, transaction-based. You may have millions in revenue, millions in transactions, pay a lot of VAT, but when it comes to your bottom line, you're a loss-making entity. So in this instance, not complying with VAT properly would hurt you more than having any gaps in corporate tax. So you have to look at it, from the entire business point of view.
It's about the compliance framework.
True.
So regardless if you will pay corporate tax or aren't, or you're an exempt person for corporate tax, you still need to have that tax governance.
True.
You need to make sure if you're eligible for an exemption to continue being eligible, continue exemption.
Yeah.
I think that's the challenge also on VAT. I mean, when we say you have an exempt activity or you have a zero-rated activity, it becomes, I would say, more complex to monitor because you need to maintain such positions. So it's about the governance, how you take things forward step by step.
I think that's brilliant. And do you have, I think we're out of time as well on this regard. So any final thoughts that you would like to share? So I'll take it from you, Maher, and then I'll take it from Dalia and Anisa as well.
Look, I think everyone should be aware of what's happening on the global perspective, because UAE is very active into taking these initiatives and apply those initiatives sometimes more faster from other countries. So e-invoicing is coming, other updates or other automation aspects are also in the pipeline. So everyone should be aware about these things, because when you do, and we've seen these cases, when you have, for example, a ERP implementation, you cannot do an ERP implementation now in isolation of your e-invoicing strategy.
True, yeah.
That will cost you
more,
double the price if you wait 2 years to implement a e-invoicing. So start thinking about this strategy, because sometimes if you do things in one shot, it really would be more efficient, less costly, and you will be ready before everyone else.
For everyone else, true. The importance of efficiency, I really like that. Dali, do you have any final thoughts to share?
No, it's just because obviously the topic that we had was evolution. And look, we're in a really good place right now. Back in 2018, we had no clarifications, no guides. We were literally just banking on the law and the regulation. But now we have so many publications from FTA that we can actually use. There has been cases where we can also look at and take as an example. So the future is looking really good right now for VAT and corporate tax.
Brilliant.
So much has happened from a VAT perspective in the last 6 years.
Indeed.
I think we wouldn't have imagined how much has happened in terms of the legislation, the guides, the public clarifications. We're starting to see case law, and yet so much will continue to happen.
Yeah.
So for me, how are businesses staying up to date? How are we as individuals staying up to date? And how are we ensuring that we can keep up to date from a VAT perspective?
Yeah.
Let me say that last bit again. So from a individual perspective, from a business perspective, from a market perspective, how are we ensuring that we keep up to date? Because so much is going to continue to happen.
Yeah.
So I would say watch this space from a VAT perspective.
Thank you very much, everyone. On that note, I'm just going to share my final thoughts. As the professionals over here have rightly said, this is a time of growth, not just for tax, but also for tax professionals. And this growth is not just happening in the UAE, it is happening at a global level. Taxation is changing, technology is being integrated, and tax authorities are looking at things much more seriously. On that note, I would recommend to all professionals out there to make sure you remain up to date, to make sure that you remain ahead of the game, and to make sure that you maintain the integrity of the profession for everyone else. On that note, I would say thank you to the panel and to everyone watching us. Take care.